Here's a rundown of the key points from Quiz 1. So, how did the Egyptians think of the physical world around them? How did their worldview differ from that of the Sumerians? The starting point for Egypt, as always, is the Nile. The Nile determines the Egyptian culture in a lot of important ways. Most significantly, the annual flooding of the Nile and the fertility it produces causes the Egyptians to expect cycles and permanence in the world around them, to trust their natural environment and to see natural forces and the gods that represent natural forces as benevolent. So cycles, permanence, and the benevolence of the gods. This also carries over into death and afterlife. The same idea is present here, that death is a transition and a point in the cycle that leads to a continuity, that leads to a kind of afterlife that is a persistence. And this is reflected in the general sense of the afterlife, and also in the mythology of the pharaohship. The fact that the pharaohs turning over from one pharaoh to the next represents both cycle and permanence, and that the transition from one pharaoh to the next has to do with a circle that involves the transformation from Horus into Osiris, and that's mediated by Isis. And so all of this is part and parcel of the same thing, and is remarkably transparent in the way that it comes back to the idea of the Nile, and the idea that in Egypt the flood is a positive thing. In Egypt, the flood equals life. And this is in direct contrast, almost comically in its opposites, to Sumer, and how in Sumer flood equals death. And at the heart of the Sumerian legendary sense of who they are is the story of the destructive flood, the deluge, that wiped out Sumerian civilization, and more importantly, represents the universality of death. That death comes for all, and that death is an ending, and that after death comes impotence. And so, therefore, during life is when achievement and accomplishment must be pursued. The Sumerians, as we talked about extensively last week, view their natural environment as potentially hostile or untrustworthy, and the gods that represent the natural forces should not be trusted. Not that they're always negative, not that they're always pessimistic, but that the gods might be benevolent one week and destructive the next. That the gods are capricious and fickle, and so therefore humans must rely upon themselves for stability and prosperity. And the fundamental difference with the Egyptians. Akhenaten is a great story in and of itself. Akhenaten is a new kingdom pharaoh, and remember that when you get a question like who is such and so, you want to situate where and when this person is significant, and talk about why. So Akhenaten is a pharaoh of Egypt, of the new kingdom, and this is of prime importance because Akhenaten's story is representative of the new kingdom and how the new kingdom is different from the old kingdom. Akhenaten finds that in the new kingdom, the power of the pharaoh is no longer absolute, and he tends to do something about this. The shift, the rise in prominence of the priests who have gained some control over Egyptian religion is a major change from the old kingdom when the pharaoh was all powerful. In the New Kingdom, this is a different world. And Egypt is part of a larger environment, a larger cosmos in which there are other powers in which they must be in rivalry with the other Bronze Age empires, in which industrial manufacturing elements are prominent. And in the New Kingdom, this means that the Egyptian pharaoh is no longer the sole arbiter of everything about culture, society, and religion. And so Akhenaten attempts to react, to undo this to the greatest extent possible by retaking control of the Egyptian religion, by creating a new religion, a new focus in religion that shifts away from Amun-Ra, the deity that has been the greatest focus of the priests, Amun-Ra, the god of the sun, and focusing on Aten, the sun's disk itself. And making this, because it is a visible and prominent god. You want to think about why Aten is chosen. Why is Aten chosen? Because Aten can actually be seen. Aten is visible and powerful. And so this and that sets Aten apart from all of the other Egyptian gods. So it's not monotheism because the other gods are still there. It's called henotheism, and what this involves is Aten being more important, the principal god, and all the other gods are secondary and subordinate. And Aten, of course, is very prominently associated with the pharaohship. And so this increases the power of the pharaoh. And Akhenaten reflects this in terms of his own regnal name, which he changes from Amenhotep to Akhenaten, building this god into his name. He builds a city, a sacred city dedicated to the god, institutes rituals, priesthood, so forth. All of this is too late. All of this doesn't survive because the nature of Egypt has transformed irreversibly. This is a different world that Egypt is in, and Akhenaten can't roll back time. He can't take things back to the days of Khufu and the old kingdom pharaohs where they were all important. He can't take Egypt out of this new world that it is part of. And so all of it is undone after his death, and this is reflected, this is symbolized in the regnal name of his son and eventual successor, Tutankhamun, returning to the old ways and to the guiding force of the priests to whom Amun-Ra is special and distinctive. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Tablet 6, what does Ishtar want from Gilgamesh? And why does he refuse? Well, Ishtar wants Gilgamesh. Ishtar is enamored of Gilgamesh's beauty, which has already been mentioned in the epic, and wants to lay with him, wants to make him her husband. But it's clear that this is for reasons having to do with sex. And so the fact that Gilgamesh refuses, even though this is sex with a beautiful goddess, is worth taking a look at. Now, Gilgamesh's stated reasons are that he is aware of how Ishtar has treated her past lovers, which is to cast them aside and give them, disturbing fates. Turn them into toads and that kind of thing. And Gilgamesh does not want to suffer this kind of indignity. Gilgamesh does not want to lose his identity as a man. And this is what he would be casting aside if he were to embrace, literally and figuratively, this proposal from Ishtar. To become the consort of a goddess would mean to leave his identity as a member of the human world behind. And this is something that Gilgamesh is seeking to protect as part of, his quest for fame, for legacy, for glory, and ultimately to circumvent his mortality. So this is about how Ishtar would treat Gilgamesh, which is that it would result in him losing his identity as Gilgamesh, his identity as a man, his identity as a member of the human community. This is a plot point for the final climactic turn of events. When he meets Utnapishtim in the final tablet, all the following are true of hieroglyphs except, and the answer here is that hieroglyphs do have a way of producing names and loan words, which is to say, to create a cartouche and to spell something out using the first sounds of a particular hieroglyph. And this is where syllabaries come from, as we discussed in the writing video. And ultimately the idea of a phonetic alphabet. But so the basic problem with ideographic alphabets is that a picture stands for an idea, and it's very difficult to deal with abstract things and names and foreign words. In the case of hieroglyphics, a system has developed, a secondary system, to add essentially a syllabic form of the hieroglyphic writing system in order to deal with these things. Why do you think unification is possible in Egypt and impossible in Sumer? So sometimes the responses to this deal with the effects, the sort of symptoms of the underlying, and so there's a single king in Egypt, and in Sumer, city-states are more prominent where they're not in Egypt, but those are the results of this process. The fact that unification comes in Egypt and comes early in Egypt isn't because there's a single pharaoh. There's a single pharaoh because unification comes. And the Egyptians are not all one culture. Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt are distinct culturally in early times. What we're talking about here is the differences in geography. The fact that in Sumer, each community is in rivalry with the others for limited resources. And the result of that is the formation of a very powerful community identity in rivalry with and often hostile to their neighbors as they fight to control all of the resources and all of the prosperity that they can wring from the difficult environment that they live in. Egypt doesn't have that. They don't have to wring anything. They don't have to fight for anything. The environment gives them everything that they need. And so in Egypt, that hostility, that rivalry, that competing for resources isn't there. The resources provide for them. And the Nile is a single commonality for all of them that connects them together economically and increasingly in terms of their unifying culture, and in the end, politically. 5,000 years ago, they come together as a single unit. So, the starting point here is, where does this come from? What makes it possible for Egypt to unify? What stands in the way of Sumer unifying? And the geographic environment is the starting point for this. And that's the end of the quiz. Please email me with any questions.